Good morning. So today the topic is human brain. So as we all know that brain along with spinal cord will be making CNS, that is central nervous system. Okay, and the CNS is totally responsible for all the body functioning, whether it is voluntary action, whether it is involuntary action. The CNS is responsible for it. Now in this case we have to discuss deep what is deep information will be discussing regarding the brain. So we'll start with the meninges. Okay, before that, we all need to understand that brain is not, it is also known as central information processing organ. So you can say it is a central information processing organ. And now we'll start with the meninges. Now what is meninges? Meninges is nothing but you can say the brain covering, the covering of brain. Okay. So here you can see the outer layer, which you can see the white one. This is what? This is the skin. This is the skin, or you can say the scalp. Now inside the skin we have what? We have skull. Okay. Now inside the skull you can see there are three layers. So this actually is, you can see, the covering of brain. Three layers are there. Okay. The outer layer, which is blue, is nothing but your dura mater. It is known as dura mater. Then the yellow one, that is the middle layer, is known as arachnoid, and the inner layer, this red one, is known as pia mater. Now it means three layers we have. The outer one is known as dura mater, middle layer is known as arachnoid, and the inner layer is known as pia mater. Dura mater and arachnoid, these are avascular. It means they don't have blood vessels. Okay, but the pia mater is highly vascularized. It means blood supply. You can say the blood vessels are rich in pia mater. Okay. Now there is one more important thing. Now this pia mater is continuously, you can say it is continuous with the cerebrum. It means it is attached with the cerebrum. Now if you see, there are certain space as well. It means the space which is between the skull and dura mater. The space between the skull and dura mater. This space is known as epidural. This is known as epidural space. Epidural space. Okay. And the space between the dura and arachnoid. This dura and arachnoid. This space is known as what? This is something you can say it is subdural. This is subdural space. And then the space between the arachnoid and pia mater, this space, this is known as subarachnoid. Subarachnoid. This is known as subarachnoid space. Now, very important point is that this in this subarachnoid space, student, we actually have CSF. Here we have CSF, that is cerebrospinal fluid. Okay. So cerebrospinal fluid is actually present in subarachnoid space. Okay, and it is actually responsible for, you can say, it acts as a shock absorber. Yes, it is actually giving the bouncing to the brain. It means the total weight which we have of the brain will be completely reduced due to this property of CSF. Okay, and again it is acting as a shock absorber, you can say. That's it. Now there is a more important point. See student, this dura mater, here I am not showing you more deep, but actually it is a double membrane. Okay, here I am not showing you, but definitely it is a double membrane. It means the outer dura mater will be known as periosteal dura mater, and inner dura mater will be known as what? Meningeal dura mater. Okay, that's a different thing. Now we'll be starting with the brain. We'll starting with the brain. Now as you all know that brain is divided into three parts. You can say the forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. In this chart, just for a reference, I can tell you. See this. So here, the upper part which you can see, this complete thing, the complete thing till here. This is, or you can say here also, you can see this thing. Now this complete thing is your forebrain. Then here you have somewhat, here you have midbrain, and then here at the bottom you have the hindbrain. Okay. If you see here, then you can say this complete thing is your forebrain. Then here you have midbrain, and then here you have hindbrain. That's it. Now, if you see the complete structure, like what are the different parts in these three different parts of the brain, you can see. See the brain, we all know it is having three parts: forebrain, midbrain, and hindbrain. Okay. Now in forebrain, student, the forebrain is also known as prosencephalon. Okay. And midbrain is also known as mesencephalon, and hindbrain is also known as rhombencephalon. Now, this forebrain is again divided into two parts. One is the telencephalon and one is the diencephalon. It means, if you see, the upper part of the forebrain is known as telencephalon and the lower part of the forebrain is known as diencephalon. In telencephalon, you have again four structures, that is cerebrum, olfactory lobes, hippocampus, and amygdala. In diencephalon, it means the lower part of the forebrain, you have thalamus, epithalamus, and hypothalamus. Okay. So if you see in the midbrain, you have three structures. One is the corpora quadrigemina, one is the cerebral peduncle, and then the third one which we have is cerebral aqueduct. In hindbrain, the hindbrain is again divided into two things: metencephalon and myelencephalon. In metencephalon, you can have pons and cerebellum. Pons and cerebellum. This is cerebellum. Here you are having cerebellum, and then in myelencephalon you have medulla oblongata. Okay. So this all stuff we have. Now each structure we have to study in deep. Okay. So if you see here now, in this case, here we will start with the forebrain. See, you all know that in forebrain, in myelencephalon, what we have? Cerebrum we have, olfactory lobe we have, and what else we have? So we have hippocampus and amygdala. In diencephalon, we have epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. Clear? And then in midbrain, again I am telling you this corpora quadrigemina, cerebral peduncle, and then cerebral aqueduct. In hindbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, and cerebellum. Okay. Now if you start with the forebrain, so we'll start with the cerebrum because that is the, you can say that is the largest part of the brain is nothing but cerebrum, which makes nearly 70% of the total brain. In this case, you see student. Okay. Before going with that, you have to see that the cerebrum which we have is actually highly folded. Highly folded structures you will see. Okay. There will be the enfolding. These cerebrum will have certain foldings. See, the upper part is known as gyrus, and the in depression which you can see is known as sulcus. And sometimes you can see a deep sulcus also. It means a kind of deep enfolding, and that deep depression is also known as fissure. See, I am telling you, if you have a structure of cerebrum, in that structure you can see many folded structures. Actually, it is a very highly complex. You can say it is highly folded structure, cerebrum. Okay, the upper part is known as what? Gyrus, and the depression is known as sulcus. Deep sulcus is also known as fissure. This fissure student can divide the cerebrum into certain lobes. Okay, that will study. Now, you can see in this case, first we will go with the fissure. As I have already told you, these fissures will be dividing the cerebrum. So, if you see properly, in this case, if I draw, this is the cerebrum for us. So, there is a longitudinal fissure. There is a longitudinal fissure which is dividing the cerebrum into two halves. It means, if for example, this is my cerebrum, so there will be a longitudinal fissure which is dividing my cerebrum into two halves. Okay, it means now I have cerebral hemisphere. Okay. Now these two cerebral hemisphere we have. Okay, fine. What else? Now again, if you see here, there is a central sulcus you can see between the frontal and parietal. See, student, this fissure actually is separating the lobes. Okay. See here. For example, if this is my cerebrum, so longitudinal fissure is completely dividing my cerebrum into two hemispheres. Okay. Then we all know that frontal parietal lobes are there. This is frontal lobe of cerebrum. This is parietal. This is temporal. Here we have, and this is the occipital. Okay. Now between the frontal and parietal, there is a, you can say again a sulcus or a fissure. You can see this is known as central sulcus. This is known as central sulcus, which is actually dividing the frontal and parietal. Then parietal and occipital is again divided by this sulcus, which you can see is known as, or you can see this fissure is known as parieto-occipital fissure. Okay, parieto-occipital fissure means it is dividing the parietal lobe with the occipital. Now there is one more important thing. Here if you see this thing, this fissure is actually known as what? This is your sylvian. This is sylvian fissure. This sylvian fissure is actually dividing it is separating the temporal lobe from frontal and parietal. Okay, so the frontal and parietal is separated by temporal lobe with the help of sylvian fissure, and this we have this longitudinal fissure we have here. So we have longitudinal, and then this will be a central sulcus, and here we have is parieto-occipital. Okay, parieto-occipital fissure. So these were the fissures which are actually dividing your cerebral, and you can see cerebral hemisphere into more certain lobes. Now as I already told you that cerebrum, the longitudinal fissure is actually dividing your cerebrum into two halves. Now these two halves actually are not just separated, these are actually connected. Okay, and these are connected due to there is one structure. If you see properly, this is one half and this is complete one half of cerebrum, and there is some yellow thing in between which is actually attaching both the cerebral hemisphere, and this yellow thing is nothing but it is known as corpus callosum. Now corpus callosum, it has the structure like this. It has the structure like this, and the function is that it is actually attaching both the cerebral hemisphere, and it is also coordinating the messages between both the hemisphere. See, this is the corpus callosum which we have, and it is actually connecting both the cerebral hemisphere. Now there are more certain, you can say structure, or you can say some points. So here we have is this structure, the initial anterior structure is known as rostrum. Rostrum we say. Okay, this is rostrum. Here we have is genu. This part is known as trunk. And here we have, at the posterior end we have splenium. Okay, so this corpus callosum again has something: rostrum, genu, trunk and splenium. It has the function that it has to attach both the cerebral hemisphere and it will coordinate the messages between the cerebral hemisphere. Okay, fine. Now what else we have? Now, fine. We all know that this is frontal lobe, this is parietal lobe, this is temporal lobe and this is the occipital lobe. Okay, these are the lobes of cerebrum. Now these lobes actually are playing some different function. Each lobe is for some different function. Okay, it is actually controlling some different activities. What is that? We will see. So the frontal lobe is what? This frontal lobe which we have on the cerebrum is actually responsible for what? So here student, the frontal lobe is actually responsible for your reasoning, your thinking, your creative ideas, everything, whatever we think and whatever we are reasoning and all, for that this frontal lobe is responsible. And in this frontal lobe only we have one region and that is known as Broca's area. So Broca's area is actually present in frontal lobe. Broca's area is also known as motor speech area and it is responsible for speech. It means if I am telling something, if I am giving you a speech, for that my frontal lobe is responsible. To frame, you can say to give a speech, the frontal lobe is responsible, and to be specific, the Broca's area. So the Broca's area is present in the frontal lobe and this Broca's area is also known as motor speech area. If you go for the next lobe, that is temporal lobe, here we have vernix area. Here we have this vernix area. Now what is this vernix area? Vernix area is also known as sensory speech area. Okay, for example, if I am telling something, you are listening to me, you are understanding my speech. Okay, it means if I am telling something, you are understanding my speech. So for understanding the words, to understand the speech, this vernix area is responsible and it is situated in temporal lobe. What is the parietal? So here the parietal is actually for sensory activities like touch, hot, and you can say the pain and all. So this sensory responses which we have, for that parietal lobe is there. And what is the occipital? Occipital is doing for vision. Your vision. So for your vision, the occipital lobe is responsible. See, now you are looking, for example, you are looking at me, so your occipital, you can say the occipital is active. Okay, you are listening to me, it means your vernix area, and you are listening to me and you are understanding my speech, it means your vernix area is responsible. I am telling to you, it means my Broca's area is active now. Okay, so this is something which you need to understand. Okay, what else we have? Okay, now here again we have some more important things. If you see, these were the lobes in cerebrum. Okay, now again, cerebrum which we have, the outer part of the cerebrum is known as cerebral cortex. Okay, it means if you see the complete cerebrum, the outer part of cerebrum is known as cerebral cortex and inner will be known as medulla. The cortex is actually grey matter. It is having greyish appearance. Okay, because there we have more nasal granules and the inner part of the cerebrum will be having white appearance and that is why it is known as white matter. White appearance is due to the minute sheet. Okay, and the grey appearance is due to the nasal granules. Okay, now if you see, this is something cerebral cortex. This is cerebral cortex for us, and in this cerebral cortex again we have three regions. You have sensory area, you have association area, and you have motor area. And these three, you can say these three area again. These are responsible for for communication and for the responsible, and these are responsible for the movement of voluntary organs. Here, now in this case you can see here the sensory signal is going, and here we have the dying signal. This is the dying signal for us. Okay, the upper part is craving signal. The sensory signal is going via thalamus to the sensory area. From sensory it will be passed, the message will pass to the association area, which will communicate the message and it will process the information. That message will be passed to the motor area. Motor area will again pass the message to the thalamus, and from the thalamus that message will be going via motor neurons to the voluntary organs. This happens. This is something of cerebral cortex which we know. Okay, if you see here, so now we know about cerebrum. Next was the olfactory lobe. Olfactory lobe, student, you can see it is a part of forebrain which will be attached to the nasal chambers, nasal cavity. Okay, and it is majorly responsible for olfaction, that is smell. If you see the next thing, hippocampus. Hippocampus is also known as RAM of brain. It means it stores memory. Next we have is amygdala. Amygdala, student, it is a part of limbic system. You can say it is a part of emotional brain, and it generates emotion. Okay. Next, diencephalon. Thalamus we have. I already told you this lower part which you can see, this complete thing is your diencephalon. This is your diencephalon. And thalamus which you can see, these two pillars which you can see is nothing but thalamus. Thalamus student is acting as a relay center between for sensory and motor signal. It means it is just a gateway to pass your sensory and motor signal. Thalamus. Then we have epithalamus. Okay. Epithalamus. If I am telling you this complete structure is your diencephalon, here we have thalamus which is acting as a relay center for the motor and sensory signals. So at the roof you can see, at the top or at the roof which we have, here we have is epithalamus. Epithalamus actually is present at the roof of diencephalon. Okay, and then if you see at the top we have this is the pineal gland. So at the top of epithalamus we have the pineal gland, which is actually a kind of endocrine gland, and it is secreting one hormone that is known as melatonin, which is responsible for sleep phase cycle. And at the base or at the floor here we have is hypothalamus. Now hypothalamus is present where? It is present at the base of diencephalon. Student, hypothalamus has two parts. It has two things. First thing, it is actually a endocrine gland. So if it is endocrine gland, it means it is releasing some hormones. Hormones like what? So oxytocin and ADH. These two hormones are produced by hypothalamus, and so it is endocrine gland. Second thing, that it is also the part of limbic system. Wherever I am telling the word limbic system, it means it is a part of emotional brain. Okay, so hypothalamus is also the part of emotional brain, and it is also responsible for, you can say, the thermoregulatory responses and all, thirst, hunger. That all stuff is actually regulated by hypothalamus. Now if you see one important thing, this hippocampus, amygdala, thalamus and hypothalamus, these four will be making, all of these four will be making one thing, and that is known as limbic system. Student, limbic system is nothing but your emotional brain. Whatever your emotions we have, okay, the happiness, anger, aggression, and you can say love and all, anything, whatever is related to emotion and all, everything is controlled by the limbic system, or this is known as emotional brain. And the emotional brain is made by hippocampus, amygdala, and thalamus is also there, and hypothalamus is also there. This is also of four brain we have seen. Now we have to see midbrain. Now as I already told you, midbrain you have three structures: corpora quadrigemina, cerebral peduncle, and cerebral aqueduct. See here we have is the midbrain. In this case, if you see properly now, here, okay, initially which you might have idea for forebrain, then you come here, we can see some things for ventricles also. See, as you all know that in your body, your heart has your heart has two ventricles. So in your brain actually you have four ventricles. We have total 4 ventricles in brain also. And what is the function of ventricles? So ventricles in the brain actually are responsible to produce what? CSF, and to store the CSF. As I already told you, CSF will be acting as a shock absorber, and it is actually giving the property of bouncing. It will reduce the weight of brain. Okay. So in this case, the CSF which we have is produced by the ventricles. To be specific, it will be produced by the choroid plexus of pia mater. Now, choroid plexus is a kind of structure of pia mater, which is the inner layer of brain. Okay. So here, if you see this thing, this is the corpus callosum, which you can see. Corpus callosum we already know, and maybe here we have cerebral also. Now below the corpus callosum, here we have the lateral ventricles. Okay, it means, see, to be simplified, if I simplify the thing, so 2 lateral ventricles we have. Here I have 3rd ventricle, and here I have 4th ventricle. Okay, so these 2 lateral ventricles actually are connected to the. This is the first, and you can see this second ventricle. This is third, and this is the fourth. 2 lateral ventricles are connected to the 3rd ventricle, and 3rd ventricle is connected to the 4th ventricle like this. Okay, this is something. So 2 lateral ventricles, which you can see, it is just below the corpus callosum. Okay, and 2 lateral ventricles are connected to the 3rd ventricle by you can say interventricular foramen. And here the 3rd ventricle is connected to the 4th ventricle by, you can say, cerebral aqueduct. See, you have 2 lateral ventricles, and then you have 3rd ventricle, and then you have 4th ventricle. 2 lateral ventricles are connected to the 3rd ventricle with the help of a passage, you can say, which is known as interventricular foramen. Okay, or you can say foramen of Monro. And 3rd ventricle is connected to the 4th ventricle with the help of cerebral aqueduct. There again we have a narrow passage which is connecting the 3rd ventricle to the 4th ventricle. The very important point is what? That all 3 ventricles, the top 3 ventricles are present only in forebrain. If you see here, this is the 1st and 2nd ventricle which you can see, which is just below the corpus callosum. Then there is a passage which is going and it is connecting the third ventricle. Okay, so it means everything above the third ventricle is present here in forebrain. Okay, now here the fourth ventricle which you have, specifically the fourth ventricle this much. Now this fourth ventricle actually is present in hindbrain. It means in this much region, it means the space between third and fourth ventricle is actually the space where you have your midbrain. Okay, so the top three ventricles are in forebrain. Here at this point here, the fourth ventricle you can see it is a kind of triangular structure for you. Okay, and here the space between the third and fourth ventricle is nothing but your midbrain. So first two ventricles are connected to the third ventricle with the help of interventricular foramen, and third ventricle is connected to the fourth ventricle with the help of what? With the help of what? With the help of cerebral aqueduct, which is the part of midbrain. This cerebral aqueduct, student, is also known as Sylvian aqueduct. Okay. Now we come to the midbrain. Okay. Fine. We know that here, see, this is what? This is the ventral portion of. This is ventral side and this is the dorsal side. Okay. So this part, actually, this part in the ventral side which we have, this is known as cerebral. This is actually your cerebral peduncle. This is the cerebral peduncle. So cerebral peduncle is actually the part of midbrain which is present at the ventral side here. Because here this much part is here, this is the pons, it means this is down one, we have is hindbrain. So in ventral region we have cerebral peduncle, which is a kind of, you can say, thick bundle of neuron, yes, and it has the function that it is connecting the forebrain to the hindbrain. See, from this region your hindbrain will start, and just from this upper region we have is your forebrain. So cerebral peduncle, you can say, is a kind of stop which is connecting the forebrain to the hindbrain. Okay, and it is present where? At the ventral position. Just back to this is your this structure which you can see, which is at the dorsal side. This is the dorsal side. At the dorsal side we have what? At the dorsal side we have is this corpora quadrigemina. Corpora quadrigemina actually is present at the dorsal side of cerebral peduncle. And here you can see there are some circle, yes. So here the two upper circles which you can see in orange, you can see yellow color, these are actually known as, here we have two superior colliculi, and here the two bottom which you can see in the blue, that is known as two inferior colliculi. It means this structure which is totally present at the dorsal side is actually known as corpora quadrigemina. Corpora quadrigemina is made up of two superior colliculi and two inferior colliculi. Two superior colliculi which you have is actually responsible for visual reflex. Visual reflex means what? So it means the movement of neck for vision. Okay, the movement of neck for vision, that is known as visual reflex, is actually done by two superior colliculi of corpora quadrigemina. Okay, which is present at the dorsal side. Two inferior colliculi which you have is actually responsible for what? For auditory reflex. It means you can say movement of neck for hearing something. Okay, that is auditory reflex. So this is the part that we can say now. We know cerebral peduncle is present at the ventral side. Corpora quadrigemina is present at the dorsal side, and here if you see properly, there is a narrow passage which is present between the corpora quadrigemina and cerebral peduncle, and actually this is something which is known as cerebral aqueduct, or you can say Sylvian aqueduct. I already told you there also. See, this triangular thing is nothing but fourth ventricle. Third ventricle is connected to the fourth ventricle with the help of what? Cerebral aqueduct. Okay, and cerebral aqueduct is nothing but a narrow passage, and it connects the majorly third ventricle to the fourth ventricle, and it is the part of midbrain. Okay, and the last is your hindbrain. So in this case of last which we have hindbrain, you all know medulla oblongata, pons, and cerebellum we have. Okay, so we directly go with the cerebellum now. Cerebellum, student, again you can say it is the second largest part of the brain. Okay, the first largest part was what? Cerebrum, which is part of forebrain. The second largest part is cerebellum. Okay, again it is highly, or you can say it is highly folded. Okay, it is having a kind of similarity with cerebrum also. And here you can see it is kind of butterfly-like structure also. Okay, we have here two hemispheres. There we were having cerebral hemisphere. Here we will have cerebellar hemisphere. So this cerebellum which we have, this is what? This is the cerebellum. So cerebellum which we have, again it has two things. See, the inner two hemisphere you can see, and here you can see a worm-like structure which is known as vermis, which actually attaches both the hemisphere. And here the inner part of the cerebellum is known as medulla. The outer part is known as what? Cortex. The medulla is actually having the color that is white appearance it has, and the cortex will have the grey appearance. Okay, now white and grey appearance, we all know white is due to myelin chain and grey appearance is due to Neisser's granules. Now here if you see, there is some folded structure, tree-like structure is there, and this tree-like structure actually, student, is known as what? This tree-like structure is known as urban brain. Urban brain. This is, you can say, a kind of tree-like structure, some highly folded structure which is seen in cerebellum. Okay. What is the function of cerebellum? That is important now. Cerebellum, student, is actually responsible to maintain the body posture. Okay, and it will be coordinating in a, it is also responsible to handle the voluntary actions, but it will be coordinating the things with cerebellum. Okay, it will tune your voluntary actions. Clear? Now the last thing is your, see, this is your pons. This is the pons region which you have, and here we have this medulla oblongata. Now in pons region which you have, student, the upper part of the pons is known as what? This upper part is known as pneumotaxic. Here we have is pneumotaxic center, and the bottom part of the pons region, this complete region is known as pons. The upper part of pons region is having pneumotaxic center, and the lower part is known as having apneustic center. Apneustic center we have. Pneumotaxic center actually is responsible for what? Rapid and shallow breathing. Okay, rapid breathing is done by pneumotaxic center. Okay, it is also known as switch off center. So it means it is playing a very important role in breathing. Apneustic center is responsible for deep breathing. Okay, the deep breathing which we can do is due to apneustic center of pons region, and pneumotaxic center is actually helping you to do rapid breathing, shallow breathing. And then we have last one, that is medulla oblongata. Medulla oblongata is, you can say, the bottom part. From here, after medulla oblongata, spinal cord will start, and that is the last part of the brain. Medulla oblongata, student, is actually, you can say, it is a kind of stalk, and it is very, and it is part of, you can say, hindbrain definitely. It is majorly controlling your involuntary actions. Involuntary actions of organ systems like respiratory system, your breathing and all, your heartbeat, that is cardiac system, even the reproductive system. Even the medulla oblongata, student, is also responsible to control the body reflex, like vomiting, hiccuping, and sneezing, coughing. This all stuff is actually, you can say, regulated by medulla oblongata. The last topic which we have is brainstem. Now brainstem means what? Brainstem means what? If you see this stalk, there is a kind of stalk which is coming up. This stalk is actually known as, this here up thing we have brain, and then stalk is coming, which is known as brainstem. Now in the brainstem, the very important thing is that the brainstem which we have here only you can see. The brainstem, here the stalk which you can see, is actually made by pons region, medulla oblongata, and the midbrain. So the last thing which we have is brainstem. So brainstem is made by what? So medulla oblongata plus pons plus the midbrain. It means the cerebellum which we have is never involved in brainstem. Cerebellum, student, is here, and brainstem is just a stalk in which you have midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Clear? The last thing here you should see is, if you see ventricles which I already told you, see two lateral ventricles, third ventricle is here, and the fourth ventricle is here. See, fourth ventricle is just present in your hindbrain, and it is having a triangular shape. Okay, and this all stuff is nothing but your human brain. I hope all of you understood. Thank you.